Hi, my name is Greg Zaban, and today we're going to discuss the contrast sales principle, which is very, very interesting because it is actually a sales technique that you can use, which used properly goes unnoticed, and yet it enables you to get higher prices for your items. So let's dive in and take a look at it. So, what is the contrast sales principle? Well, basically, what it does is just as the name suggests, it contrasts one item against another. It makes one item seem more attractive compared to the other item, and when used properly, the perceived value of the item that you're trying to sell actually increases so you can get higher margins. And lesser items can be sold at higher margins as well if you use this technique properly. And higher priced items can be made to seem better values because of how you're using this technique. It's very, very interesting. And again, it doesn't seem like a sales technique, so it's something that can be just interwoven into your sales pitch, and it works very well. So let's look at some examples. Here's an example of real estate. Some real estate agents and real estate companies have what they call setup properties or setup houses. And setup houses are basically rundown houses that are in probably a good geographic area. So the price would be, let's say, the target price for the client, say, is $200,000. They would have a setup house that's run down and it is priced at $200,000. Okay, so the setup house is in bad condition. It's really not meant to be sold. And after the client views that, then they have that perception of what a $200,000 house would be. Then the real estate agent takes the client to the targeted properties, and they look 10 times better than the setup property. So the perceived value of the targeted properties now is greater because you've shown it right after another property that is not in very good shape. So it's a pretty interesting technique on how you could do that. So let's look at another example. Let's look at a clothing store. Contrary to popular belief, most people think that you'd want to start out with a lower priced item and kind of build your way up. And that hasn't proven to be true. The most profitable way is to start out with a higher priced item such as a suit. They're always sold first. If you go into a clothing store, you'll see that the suit is always sold first, or the high priced item, whether it be a woman's dress or whatever. The higher priced item is first introduced and try to be sold first, and then the accessories can be sold at higher margins because of the lower price compared to the suit or the dress. To give you another example, after purchasing a $500 suit, a sweater can be sold for $99 rather than $79 because the overall perception of $99 compared to $500, which they've already agreed to buy, seems relatively small. So they can get that extra $20 out of the sweater, which then you add several other accessories, and before you know it, your margins on everything has increased. So you could probably make the case that you could sell a higher priced item at a lower margin and then make your blended margins work by adding smaller accessories at a higher margin. And then that way your blended margin would be, your overall blended margin would be higher. Another great example is cars. Automobiles, you always negotiate the price of the car first, right? If you go into a car dealer, they're not going to ask for everything and everything's all included and then let's negotiate. And if you look at any good negotiating team or any good negotiating person, they always start out with the large item first. So here you start out with the price of the car, you negotiate that price first, and then you add the accessories after. So you price the accessories individually as well, just like in the clothier example, you price the accessories individually. You want them to seem smaller in price, but they add up as you go along. So the total sale ends up being higher. So here again, even if the car dealer took a hit on the margin, on the overall margin of the car, by the time you add in the accessories, the radio, the CD player, DVD player, power brakes, power windows, and all the different packages, what happens, right? The overall total sales package now isn't $20,000. It's now $25,000 or $24,000 or $22,000, and those accessories have been added at higher margins, so the overall blended margin of the sale is higher. Now you can apply this principle to people as well. Now let's give a very probably common example. A student gets a bad grade in college and calls the parents to say she fell and had to go to the hospital, right? Well, what do you think the parents do? All of a sudden they're like, "Oh my goodness, are you okay? Is anything wrong? What did they find out at the hospital? Did you break anything?" And she says no, and then after she set the expectation of her going to the hospital, then she tells her parents that she got a bad grade and actually she didn't go to the hospital. Now, I'm sure she'd take a little bit of heat over telling her parents that she went to the hospital, but the bottom line is she probably won't get near as much grief for getting that bad grade in one of her college courses than she would have if she wouldn't have led with something much more dramatic and much more worse off. So it's all about perception. There's a lot of different ways you could use this to boost your sales. So kind of think through what you're trying to do. Kind of keep in mind what your ultimate goal is, and if you have to make a little bit less of a margin on one product, try and make a little bit more on some lesser items and sell them at a higher margin, so your overall blended margin will be one that's much more desirable. If you'd like to learn more about selling and marketing, go to www.gregzavan.com. That's www.gregzavan.com.